Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In this one I want to walk you through a really important part of this series that I've been walking you through. If you are a part of this community, you know that I've been walking through a step-by-step tutorial on how to cover a loan management system using Django and Django Tenants. So one of the things that really stood out to be really challenging is how to handle user authentication, especially for me who was working with multiple user types. So after some research, I've decided to come up with a video to just share with you how you can implement multiple user types. So this is for a loan management system, but whatever system that you're working on, I believe that this type of implementation can really help you to get your SaaS application up and running quickly. So in order to come up with a multi-user system, you need to first design your database. So that is one thing that I really learned the hard way. You can't just go and start coding it. You really need to learn how to design your database. Think about the users, think about the roles. Design it using a pen and a paper, a whiteboard, or maybe just some tools. And for me, we're going to use a tool that is called Lucidchart. So that is one thing that I recommend that you guys do before you start coding, and design your database, design the flow, and then now you can start putting it into practice into your code. So if you're looking forward to build a multi-user type of system, then I believe that this video will no doubt help you in designing and also implementing that user authentication. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first thing that I want to walk you through is the actual design of the system. So as you all know that Django only supports one authentication user model. For example, if you're working on different user type, in my case I was having like 3 types of users. The first one was the platform owner, that is me, who manages all the tenants, does the onboarding, checks the payments, invoicing and everything. Then we also have another layer of users, which is the second layer. That's not going to be the tenant user. The tenant user is going to be the client that you're going to onboard, right? Then you also have like other type of users such as members and staff. So this is where things get hard. You can't just have 2 user models. For example, Django only supports one auth user model. So how do you handle the tenant user and also other types of users such as the members and the staff? Because yes, they also do need to log into the system at some point. Maybe if you're planning to build a mobile app, or maybe just a web app for the clients and also a web app section for the tenants, not tenants but for the staff to actually log in. So that is where you need to think it a little bit, right? So the first thing that you need to do is just you need to have like one source of authentication, and that is going to be our global user. So global user is the first layer. This is just used for authentication, just used to identify if the user is belonging to the system. So we have the global user, then it has a field for the email, and it also has different user types here that you can see. We're going to have like a super admin, a platform user, a tenant admin, and then it has like a tenant ID which will be used to track the users. Now the next thing that we have, which is the second layer, is that we have the tenant user. So ideally, like jamming everything in one global user model, like having all the members, the loan managers and the loan officer in a single auth user model, can get really messy. The first thing is not gonna give you that clean separation that you need when you're working with. So that is where we are coming up with the second layer of users, that is the tenant user model. And this tenant user model is going to have like a one-to-one relationship with the global user. Remember, this is what is going to authenticate this user here. So it has to be one-to-one type of relationship with the global user. This is going to be kept inside the tenant apps. Remember, the tenant user, because we want the tenants to manage their own users, so that's why we're keeping it in the tenant apps. But the global user is going to be in the public schema, so we have to keep it in shared apps. So global user, this is the first layer of users that's going to be used for authentication. Then we are going to have the tenant user, which is the second layer. This is just going to hold the different user types that you're going to have for the tenant. So the tenant can have users such as the branch manager, the member, the loan officer, and also it's going to have fields such as the first name, last name, phone number, and everything. And now we're not done yet, because the system is going to have other types of users such as staff, as well as the member ID. So once again, we are extending the tenant user model, so that this one makes it easy. So if you want to just add another model, you can just easily extend it. So example, if you want to have like an auditor, you can just have an auditor model, then you give it a user type of auditor inside here. So with this way, we're just extending the tenant user. Then this will hold some business logic for the member, such as the loan status, financial documents, mini statements, right, tracking things such as the member balance and everything. So just to keep the system clean, these fields should not be kept inside the tenant user model. So we want to have like each model to have its own set of logic. Then you also have the staff ID, which is going to have the branch, the date hired, and also the tenant user. So this is how I designed my database. We have a one-to-one relationship with the global user that is going to be used for authentication with different types of user types. The super admin, that's me, the platform owner. We also have the tenant admin, that is going to be the admin who manages the tenant user, as well as member and staff models that are inheriting or that are extending the tenant user model. So that is it for our design. So let's go right into the code. So first thing, let's explore the backend folder. This is what holds our logic for the backend code. Now the first thing that I want to show you is how the apps have been laid out. So we have different apps. We have the tenants app, of course, the tenant apps. Let's start with the shared applications. So we have super admin, the home, payments, billing, invoice, and everything. And notice that I'm having two apps for accounts. The first one is the accounts app, that's going to be for the global user, and we also have the tenant accounts app. This should be placed inside this tenant schema. So once that is that, now let's go straight into our global user model to see how we have defined our fields here. So inside my accounts, I have the models, then the global user. So if I scroll to the top, you'll notice that I have different user types. The first one is our super admin, that is me, the platform. We also have a platform owner. If you just have to, just some basic fields here for our global user model, the date joined, that is just for timestamps and everything. Then we also have this manager here for the global user. Now one thing that you need to do is to override the save method, so that whenever you save a different user, for example super admin, that's me, the platform owner, that is going to have a status of true. Then staff also should be set to true. Then platform owner, we're setting it to false. We don't want to give platform staff the super user status. Then we also have the tenant admin. Tenant admin is going to be the owner of the business that you're going to onboard. So super user, you have to remember to set it to false, then give staff to true. So member, these are now the members who are going to register to apply for credit services for each and every organization. So that is it for our tenant global user model. Now let's go and check our tenant accounts. So we have two accounts, tenant accounts, that is going to be handling all the logic for the tenants, just to keep our user model separate. So we have models for the tenant user. So this is our tenant user model. As you can see, we have different types of user types. Tenant admin, that's going to be the owner of that business, the branch managers, the loan officer, and also the members. So we are having a global user which has a one-to-one field with the auth user model. So we really need to have this, because this is what will be used to identify this user when they're going to log in. So without this relationship, we won't be able to know which type of user this person is. So we need to link it with the global user model, as it will be used for authentication. So that is really important to have this link between the tenant user and also the global user. Then the identity details, of course, we need to have like a first name, last name, and phone number. So these ones, we're not keeping them into staff and member models. We just want to keep them in the tenant user model, so that when we want to create other models such as auditor models, it becomes easy to extend, so that you don't have to duplicate the identity details in every model that we're going to have. We're going to keep the identity details inside our tenant user model, so that later if we decide to create another app, let's say for auditor, we can just extend it and give it a role of auditor right on top over here, so we don't have to like duplicate all these details across our models. Then of course we have user type. It's going to be user types that we're going to do there. That's going to be the choices. Allowed apps is an array field. This is good for permissions because we want to set the allowed apps that this tenant user can access. For instance, you might want the loan officer to access like the members app, but not to access the finance app. So it's good to have like an array field when you are assigning permissions to do that, like we are going to see in a few. Then we are going to setting the is active to true. For the tenant user, is email verified, that is going to be set to false. These are just for USSD for our pin. We are setting the pin hash and the pin salt for the USSD authentication, because we're going to have a USSD where members can just register via USSD, so that is where we are keeping the pin. Then lastly, we're just importing our tenant user manager. That is what we're going to check on next, and we're also setting some indexes here just for queries, fast queries. And then that is it for our tenant user model. Now let's go to the manager. This is where it's really important to see how you assign the permissions. So the first one is that you are creating the owner. Owner is now the business owner of this person. So we are creating the owner. We just pass in the first name, last name, phone number, and some extra fields. Then we return the create tenant user. It's at the bottom. I'll show you that in a bit. So create tenant user, this is now the core user that we're going to create. So this is our create tenant user method. Remember, we are not using the create user that we use in the global user. We are using the create tenant user method. So the first thing is that we just need to generate an email if it's not provided. So we're just using the phone number plus the tenant ID, then .local whenever the email is not provided. Then we're going to create a tenant profile, a tenant user profile. So tenant user is that one. Then we're creating the global user is equal to global user. Now this is the actual tenant user model that we've just talked about in a few. So the tenant user, we are creating the global user. We are giving it the global user that we've just created here, the first name, the email, and also the user type. Then we're also passing the extra fields. Then this is really important. You need to assign permissions. For this case, we have a function here that is called assign permissions, that is just used to assign the tenant some permission depending on the user type. Remember, when you're creating like a staff, a branch manager, they're going to have different permissions from the tenant admin. So if you look at my permissions here, I do have the role permissions. Then we have the tenant admin. It has like custom permissions such as approving of loans, rejecting of loans, and also disbursing of loans. The permissions are different from the branch manager, so you need to take that into account, that you need to have different role permissions for different users. Then you use the tenant manager to actually define that. So whenever you create a user, they are being given permission based on the user types that you have. That is how we create multiple user types using Django and Django Tenants. So you can see how easy it is that you can implement the different types of user types, and also add some managers that can just allows you to just twist it and just handle the user authentication, have different user types, decide the permission that you want to assign for different roles, and how you can actually structure your application and design it using a tool like Lucidchart that I just showed you. It allows you to create beautiful relationships for your database design. So if you found this video useful, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving it a like, and also sharing it with someone. So that's it for today, and see you in the next one.